Some of you may be familiar with Wikipedia. That's an online encyclopedia. I recently came across another online encyclopedia called Wiki Shiva. And Shiva comes from the word, or is the ending of the word, yeshiva. And it's a yeshiva-run website where they discuss different halachic concepts. One of the entries in this Wiki Shiva is on the miracle of Hanukkah. Well known, the Beis Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, in his commentary on the Torah, asks, why do we observe 8 days when there was enough for at least the first day? And various answers are given. This entry in the Wiki Shiva is a compendium of all people who dealt with this question. And the author points out that one sefer, for example, is called Ner L'Meila, where 100 answers were given. There's another quote, another sefer quoted, where 500 answers are given as to what the miracle of Hanukkah is. I'd like to say that there's one more miracle that nobody deals with, none of the commentators in their countings. And that's the miracle that all of you are participating in this evening, here in B'nai Torah. When this evening was conceived, the idea was that we wanted a low-cost evening, and as we picked the date, December 24th, as it turns out, there are no waiters or waitresses available. The caterer didn't want to provide anything, so everything you see here has been done by volunteers. I think it's important both for the volunteers and for those who are enjoying the evening to mention some of the individuals. So, Liz Gordon is our catering chair. Liz was running back and forth between her home and our food supplier for this evening, which is Golden Chopsticks, by the way. We'll give them a free ad. We want to thank Liz for all of her hard work, and believe me, we made her crazy. No gluten, or at least some gluten-free meals or dishes, no MSG, etc., etc. The only thing we told her is that it should be kosher. And I'm happy to report she did comply with that request. This afternoon, if you take a look at your tables, they're really decorated beautifully with the centerpieces and the little stars and the Hanukkah coins, etc. None of that happened by itself. It just didn't fall from the ceiling. At 1 o'clock this afternoon, there was a group of individuals who got together here, and we were folding napkins, we were putting centerpieces, and we were putting stars on tables, and I would like to mention who those individuals were. Elaine Lazarus was here, Debbie Cherniak, Ruthie and Murray Miskin, and I don't think I've left anybody out, except one person whom I'm coming to in a second. So, in addition to having these volunteers, we also had a party planner help us out. And I highly recommend this party planner for any of your symbols in the future. This party planner's name is Alan Zuck. on Alan's background as a school principal, I think he has in his blood a certain slave driver element. And the emails would come day and in the middle of the night, we need to do this, we need to do that, and here's a checklist, and this has to be done, etc., etc. But the unique thing about Alan is he doesn't just give orders, but he's a leader by model. Whatever you see here today, and the individuals who were here this afternoon, and the whole evening, the concept of it and the planning was all due to Alan. And we all want to give him a huge hand. Finally, I'd like to thank Eli Woznicka and Eli Green for providing the music. In a moment, the rabbi will give us his presentation. Afterwards, we'll have a little bit of dancing, some Hanukkah music, and then we will open up a dessert table on my left at the corner of the room. This has been an evening so far full with gashmias, wonderful food, wonderful music, and it's highly appropriate that we mix that gashmias with some ruchnias, some spirituality. And I think I just lost my spiritual advisor. Okay, here it comes. So without any further ado, it's a wonderful pleasure. I mean, I wanted to ask you all. I mean, we charged $30 for members and $35 for non-members. Sorry? Where could you get for $30 or $35 a delicious meal like this and a multimedia presentation with live music?
Go to that video.
Without any further ado, I'd like to ask our spiritual leader, Rabbi Milevsky,
see if the video plays. I just know.
to lead us spiritually.
Okay.
Give me a few minutes.
Yeah, you know what? I don't need it.
Yeah.
Good evening. Good evening.
Shall I do the lights now?
Soon, when Alan's ready.
Alan,
See if that video plays a little bit. So first of all, thank you, Usher. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all those who put the time and effort and energy. The lecture is sponsored. So we'd like to take this opportunity to thank George and Florence Weinberger. It's to commemorate the yahrzeit of George's mother, Edith Weinberger, Altayit Bas David Zichrono Livracha. Also Nishmas Florence's mother, Leah Day, Leah Bas Dov Arya, Zichrono Livracha. George's uncle, Mike Vas, yahrzeit is actually tonight, Moshe Shalom Ben Yitzchak Isaac. And also for George's sister, Judy Weinberger, Hayarezel Shendel Bas Avrom, yahrzeit is tonight as well. So we thank you in the Neshama Shabbat Aliyah. Also, we have an additional sponsor, and we would like to take this opportunity to thank Fran and David Wolf. It's to commemorate the yahrzeit of Sidney Wolf. It's the 6th yahrzeit tonight of Shimon Ben Yitzchak Gershon. So we thank our sponsors, and a little bit of Divrei Torah that you will hear should indeed be a schus for all the neshamas, and we are grateful indeed. Okay. So this is not going to be an extended, long lecture. This is not the goal of this evening And obviously not the great attraction. We had music, we had Chinese food, so no one would tell me that the lecture is the attraction here, but nevertheless, it's a gathering. Do you know if the video works? Or
I think it works. I tried it at home.
you tried it and okay, so video one, when I tell you, we'll play with it. Thank you so much. So now, title aside, what I really was trying, or what we're going to really try to get across tonight is the fact that we are impacted by the culture that is around us. And I think you would all agree that a little bit of the identity of our Hanukkah is affected by what our neighbors are celebrating tonight and tomorrow. To some extent. And remember our son Hillel mentioned a few years ago that they have some kind of stuffed animal that you could put in a Jewish home. I forgot its name, but it goes on a shelf. The elf is not what we do, thank you. But what Hillel was telling me was that there's a Yiddish version of the elf.
A mensch on a bench.
A mensch on the bench, that's what it was. Thank you so much. So we get this feeling that there is some kind of effect, perhaps the gifts of Hanukkah, gifts every night, the gifts under the menorah. We have this feeling that, you know what, they're not bad things, but they came from a foreign source. So what I would like to share with you is, yes, indeed, it's a concern, by the way. It is a concern. We have to retain our identity. We have to know what we are about. Jewish education is fundamental. We want to keep our identity, and we have to be proud of it to be sure to transmit it to the next generation. All true. But my point is that there is actually a little bit of a positive element to the concept of being impacted, because just as you are affected by the surrounding, you have the ability to turn around and impact others. And it is something that is taking place in the land of Israel. And that's what I'm trying to get to. But obviously we're going to go through a little bit of a journey and talk about the realities. We are impacted by society. There has been a concern for many, many decades. And we're going to end off with what I consider the positive of this concept. We're going to start off with a slide that's going to quote from the Rambam. Do you see the Rambam? You see text from the Rambam, right? The Rambam tells us, you should know, and this is our Torah for tonight, part of our Torah, Derech Briato shel Adam lihiyot nimshach bedeotav ubema'asav achar re'av v'chaverav. It is how's the back able to read this at all back? Good. So Maimonides is telling us that it is human nature to follow the thinking and actions of those who surround them. And it is human nature to be impacted by friends, colleagues, v'noheg keminhag anshe medinato. It is common, says to us Maimonides, to be impacted by those who surround you. And in other words, the next slide will quote from Aristotle what we well know, and that is, man is by nature a social animal. The next slide will end off a quote from the Rambam. And the Rambam makes a suggestion here. Lefikach, therefore, tzarich adam lihitchaber. A human is recommended to link himself, to connect himself, the tzaddikim, to righteous people, people that have values of decency, values where there's respect to our tradition, to our identity, values that understand that you have to be sensitive to the welfare of others. And it is appropriate, if you are going to be impacted by others, hang out with wise people. You're going to learn from them. If you are around people that are sensitive, you're going to be impacted by it. If you are associating yourself with people of scholarship, that's going to develop within you a desire of knowledge. And so too, v'yitrachek min hareshaim, keep away from evildoers. Right? We always talk about children and teenagers. Right? Be careful how you choose your friends. The same applies to adults. And therefore, you should yitrachek min hareshaim haolchim bachoshech, kedei she'lo yilmod mima'aseihem. Now, when were these words quoted more than any other time in halachic literature, in hashkafic literature? So there is an explosion of quotations or quotings that come, or references to these words of Maimonides, starting in the middle of the 19th century, and it reaches a peak in 1880. And why is that? Next slide will give us some clarity. When Jews started making their way in 1880, 1881 from the Shtetl in Russia and Lithuania to the shores of North America. And right and left you hear rabbis saying there are some significant concerns we have, because after all, what kind of Torah environment exists in North America? And just to give you a few examples. The first example is going to be a statement made by the great Reb Shlomo Kluger, a rabbi in Brody in Galicia, and he was considered one of the greatest scholars during that period of time. And he is addressing a question. If you move on to the next slide, he is addressing the following question. And that has to do with the turkey and Masoret. It's a different and well-known discussion. Now, when it comes to birds, we consider birds kosher if there is a tradition. It is not enough if they have traits that identify them as a kosher species, but rather there must be a tradition. So there was a very old debate going back already 3 centuries regarding the status of the turkey. Reb Shlomo Kluger was told, worry not, turkey is fine, because in the United States of America in the 1850s, they have a masoret that is kosher. And Reb Shlomo Kluger in the next slide responds, are you out of your mind? You're quoting American Jews to me as a source for a masoret? So Reb Shlomo Kluger says, Hine, Medinat America, let's face it, America, Nityashev be'Yisrael, it only became settled with Jews, Ze'erech mea shanim, they only started arriving there in a significant amount, and obviously this is before 1880. So when he talks about a significant amount, he means a couple thousand, not the tens and hundreds of thousands that arrived later. But he notes, they only made their way like mea shanim, umikodem, beforehand, lo haya sham yeshuv Yisrael, there were no Jews there. And therefore, says Reb Shlomo Kluger, uminayin lahem masoret. How can you claim that they have a masoret regarding the turkey? And then in the next slide he adds that, by the way, you want to know who goes to America? Ve'od. And in addition, zot yadua, it is well known, ki az, that in the past, ba'u l'sham, you want to know who made their way to that country? Rak kol marei nefesh, people that were bitter. V'chol asher lo noshed, this is a term from the Bible that relates to those who owe money to others. You owe money, they're after you. Where do you go? Right? To the United States of America. V'kalei hadat, and people that are light-minded, not people that carry within them the fear of God, but rather people that are lacking it. And therefore, most of them are kaledat. Ve'en kidai lismoch alehem. Please don't quote to me a masoret that exists in North America. You cannot rely on him. Ve'al divreihem sheyesh lehem masoret lekach. So one example, concern. You go to America, there's no one there, and it is really emphasized by, next slide, a rabbi we are very familiar with, the righteous Chafetz Chaim, passed away in 1933. He was in his mid-90s. He was publishing already for over 60 years, respected as a scholar and as a tzaddik, already in the 1860s and 1870s. And the Chafetz Chaim, well known for his work on halacha, well known for his work on Lashon Hara, he also wrote a work, a small booklet, in the next slide, by the name of Nidchei Yisrael. And in this booklet, published around 1880, 1890s, he is addressing his concern for what is happening to Jewish families and Jewish individuals that make their way to the New World. And in it, he tries on the one hand to give a level of chizuk, of spiritual strengthening to those who are leaving their communities, making their way to this new country. And in the next slide, he tells us, you should know, Hinei Achai, and this is at the end of his work, where he talks about encouragement and sticking to tradition, and how to overcome the challenges, and how to retain, even though in the environment there, Judaism is very foreign. But he ends off by telling us, Hinei Achai, my dear brothers, Acharei kol divrei hasefer hazeh, even after this complete work, sheherachti, where I went ahead and in length, I attempted lechazek yedei hamitgorerim ba'arzot harachokot. I attempted to go ahead and strengthen those who are living in countries very distant from the hub of Judaism. And my goal was shelo yitrashu sham, they should not weaken themselves. Mekiyum mitzvot haTorah, from the fulfillment of Torah. In next slide he says, Mikol makom, nevertheless, haderech hamiti, you want to know what's ideal? This is how he ends his work. The ideal is, ve'ayoter nechona, line 2, and the most appropriate practice would be, lechol mi sherotzeh liskot be'emet, anyone that truly wants to merit, lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in front of the Almighty, hu she'yitchazek, he should strengthen himself, shelo yishtakea b'mdinot hahem, but rather, make your way back. Next slide. V'im ki mipnei rov dochkot. True, due to great financial difficulty and stress, utzrach linsoa sham, there's no question that at times he had to make his way there. Al kol panim, bottom line, says the saintly Chafetz Chaim, kasher ya'azor lo Hashem, when the Almighty assists him, and he has the ability, yashuv lebeito v'yiftach ba'Hashem. Meaning his greatest recommendation to the Jews in America, come back to Europe. This is what he writes. Knowing history, this is obviously challenging to swallow, but this is his point. America, and in it, continues, he quotes obviously the works of the Rambam, you're going to be impacted by the society there. You're going to have great challenges retaining what your traditions are about. So therefore, the best would be to have trust in the Almighty, V'yiftach b'Hashem hanoten lechem lechol basar, the one who gives bread to all creatures, shefanesenu gam bebeito. So this attitude towards America, because of the fact that you're going to be impacted by the society. 2 more slides to give you this idea. The next one is a quote from Rav Hoffman. You have the next one? Yeah. Reb David Tzvi Hoffman mentions here that he was a great posek in Germany, and he was the head of the Berlin Seminary. He really raised the whole generation of great God-fearing German rabbis. There was a uniqueness to the German rabbis. They were well-educated, they spoke in the vernacular, familiar with the science, philosophy, and yet God-fearing Jews who were able to save a whole generation of German Jews. Different time to discuss him. But he tells us that you should know, even though historically we had an approach in the shtetl, that if you would interact with a Jew that does not observe the Shabbat, we consider him outside of the community. Times have changed. And he notes specifically, ha'anashim me'Amerika einam nifsalim al yedei chulul Shabbat. In other words, don't view their lack of observance of the Shabbat as people that are walking away from Judaism. That's not the case for them. Because for them it is still possible to be considered bona fide Jews, even though they don't keep the Shabbat. Why? That's what America does to you. He uses terminology that is trying to get the message across. They don't have the education. and they don't have the education, the guidelines from Shtetl does not apply to the guidelines from the Jew from Philadelphia. This is what he tells us. One more slide, a little bit about America. And one of the greatest poskim in Galicia, actually, and the beginning of the 20th century was Rav Shvadron. Rav Shvadron. He had a well-known grandson who lectured a lot in Israel, but the Rav Shvadron the Maharsham became authority that many turned to, especially if they were seeking a leniency. He was known as a person with great knowledge and broad shoulders, and people turned to him on the most complex issues for him to address and figure out a way out. And in this specific tshuva that is quoted, we are dealing here with a very common question, and there are hundreds of such questions asked to rabbinic authorities from 1880 until 1940, hundreds. And the issues have to do with the fact that you had a married couple in Europe, the husband got into some trouble, made his way to the United States, came to America, was enjoying himself, forgot about his wife, she needed a get. Often, a bet din in North America, New York in most cases, Philadelphia at times, would go ahead and write the get and send it, which halachically is 100% valid. But the problem is what happens when there is a mistake, and it appears that for European rabbis, the rabbis who were in North America were simply not knowledgeable enough, and therefore they made mistakes that impacted the status of the get. So therefore there are hundreds of responsa that deal with a get that arrives from North America, trying to release an aguna, but the problem is that there are some serious question marks about the spellings, issues that disqualify the get, and rabbis put a lot of time and effort to figure out a way to release the wife. So this one is the one I quote, because on the bottom line he gives us the name of the city where the husband arrived at. And you're going to have to figure out what city in the United States of America is now. So for those of you, let's read it. The Shaila comes from the Baal who is in Dallas, Texas. Dallas, Texas. So obviously you figured it out, it's Dallas, Texas. But for a European law, he hears Dallas, Texas, he thinks it's just one long word, a name of a city. And it's interesting because there are several such situations that the rabbis were not exactly familiar with New York, one word, two word, how to spell it. An interesting question indeed. This is all about the impact of society. We all sense it, we are all aware of it. We can be very, very proud that we have produced after the Second World War a whole generation, a whole incredible generation with incredible numbers of people that are educated, committed to their people, committed to their land, committed to their tradition. We had an incredible rebound. My grandfather, Hillel Manis, in Cleveland, had a portrait of himself in his dining room. And it wasn't something he would do. He was not a vain individual, not someone that would ever spend money on anything that's not necessary. So as a child, I asked Zaidi, what's the story behind the portrait? So he mentioned that in the late 1940s in Cleveland, Ohio, he interacted with an old Jew that was a painter. And the old Jew painter, was concerned that due to the fact that youth is abandoning faith, and there are no longer going to be any Jews that have any commitment or flavor of Judaism to them, he developed this desire to make portraits of how Jews used to look. So my Zaidi already had a nice beard, and he aged a lot during the war. So this Jew made a portrait of Zaidi to be able to show to the next generation how a Fruma Yid kicked, how he looks. And my grandfather was getting the point that in the late 1940s, that was the mindset, that there's no future to Torah Judaism. It's in decline. And boy, thank God we see otherwise, and therefore we're going to focus now a little bit on the positive in the next slide, and that is our impact on the world. We're having an impact on the world. We know it. We know it very well. We are extremely proud of it. And in Eretz Yisrael more than anywhere else, and that's what I want to really do here tonight, to show you a clip And the clip, we're going to get to it. Not yet. No, the clip is later. The clip is later. But this is more the introduction to the clip. And the clip is about the impact. Torah Judaism, and again, there are many, many different flavors and many, many different approaches. And we are an enhanced nation because there's diversity within the Torah world, right? You know that very well, and obviously we are all proud of those many, many streams. But I'm going to show you a clip which needs a little bit of an introduction. So this is an introduction to clip 1 to appreciate what I believe is the Pirsum Hanes, the impact that we are having, the impact that Torah Judaism is having on the world around you. Now, next slide. Israel is a complex place, by the way. The state of Israel is extremely complex. We all know that. And we've talked in the past about a little bit about the history of specific individuals. Among them was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Avraham Yeshayahu Karelitz, known as the Chazon Ish. Passed away in late 1953, a fascinating scholar, and many call him and consider him the father of Haredi Judaism. Meaning, he went with the establishment of the Jewish state. He broke away from like the Neturah Karta or the Eidah Haredit that rejected any interaction with the Jewish state, but felt that we have to work with them, but at the same time not see it as a messianic party or a messianic entity that will save and solve all the issues of the Jewish people. Haredi Judaism was a small segment of the population at that time, and although he is considered the father, the most significant figure in understanding the Haredi world of Israel, which Kenai Nahara is growing and growing and growing, the most significant figure is not the Chazon Ish, but rather the next slide and the next individual. Can you identify him? Rav Menachem Anshach. Okay? Rav Shach, a very brilliant individual. You know, philosophically, obviously, if you have roots in religious Zionism, you would not agree with some statements or... Is this where?
It's 1998.
You know, it's funny, I just read that in Israel, there is a person who's 102, and he just got in the mail his registration to kindergarten. Because the computer works with 2 digits. And therefore, because he was born in 06 or 07, so therefore the computer was sure that he's 2 years old, so they interview him, you know, and he's in 102 and a half Kenai Nahara. So this is a similar idea. So I think you could figure, it means number one, that everyone's, look, he was born in 1898, 1898. He lived for 103 years. 103 years. Now keep that information in mind, it's actually interesting. He was extremely active politically in 1996. He was 98 years old, involved in meetings and issues. Supposedly he got pneumonia, but he was still lecturing people to be sure to vote for Netanyahu in the 1996 election. Very interesting individual, but no doubt the father of Haredi Judaism, because the numbers exploded. And he took a very strong stand, right? It's interesting to note that he was the head of the Panivesh Yeshiva, that although in general it was the hub of the Haredi philosophy, on Yom Ha'atzmaut they were careful to have their blue and white flag. So there was a level of complexity, but a rejection that the yeshiva students should serve in the army originated with Rav Shach, and he had a very significant impact on the Jewish world. With his passing, there was a void, and it was not exactly filled, because although there was a next great rabbi who took over the role, and that is the next slide. In this slide, if you look to the right, you see there Rav Elyashiv. And he was born in 1910, passed away in 2012. He lived for 102 years. So the first one of the Haredi leaders of the past 60 years lived until he was 103. And Rabbi Elyashiv, who was a posek, He was 100 years old, still guiding in halachic issues. He somehow inherited the status of the Gadol Hador, not interested at all in politics, had no desire for anything but Jewish law and halacha. And it agitated him that they were driving him nuts because he had no interest. And as a result of that, they were able to manipulate him, because sometimes they would come with issues and he would just give an answer because he wanted them off his back, but they were not honest individuals who came to him. So words that you would hear in the name of Rabbi Elyashiv were not from Rabbi Elyashiv quite often, and some significant cracks were appearing in the Haredi leadership, even though he was a completely righteous person, committed every bone in his body to the study of Torah, that he did for a period of close to 100 years, day and night. If you notice in the picture that I posted, we have here my late father to the far left, arguing with him some halachic issue, and listening in right in the middle is the Baruch Chaim Tovim, is Mr. Albert Dov Friedberg. He's right in the middle there, and this was a picture that for us in the family is one of great interest. With his passing, there is a major shift that occurs, where there is a new Gadol Hador. So remember, 103, 102, and in the next slide, we have a Rav Aaron Leib Steinman. Passed away at age 104. Show me any corporation or any organization where you have 3 leaders and all 3 of them, one after the other, live past 100 and are active. All 3 of them. Very fascinating. Now, Rav Steinman was unique, because there was a shift that occurred philosophically. He was addressing a very different Haredi world that grew, and therefore there was a requirement for some significant adjustments. Adjustments in education, where it would be considered unacceptable to go ahead and have secular programs within a Torah institution. Rav Steinman was more accepting of it. When it came to the Tzahal, Rav Steinman, perhaps not publicly, but Shah still gave a tacit approval to the Nachal Haredi. And just to show you significance, this picture comes actually from The Economist. The next picture of Rav Steinman comes from the Jerusalem Post. Rabbi Steinman, Haredi leader. The next slide shows to you the Nachal Haredi, which couldn't have taken off without approval from the top in the Haredi world. So a significant authority he was, and due to the fact that there were some liberal traits within him, if you take into consideration the historical Haredi party line, there was suddenly a breakaway that occurred because he was viewed as too liberal, and a different discussion because that's not really what we're trying to get to. Now, to understand the first group, you'll need to remember 2 personalities. Number 1 was Rav Steinman, and the second one is a rabbi by the name of, next slide, and this is not a Gadol Hador, he's a well-respected scholar. His name is Rabbi Sirotskin. Rabbi Sirotskin was an old rabbinic family. He was a rabbi in Cleveland. And what we're gonna helpfully, with assistance from above, we're gonna see in this clip is the following. In the Haredi world, there is a lot of focus on education, and in it, there's a big to-do when it comes to getting your child into a specific school. They want to be sure that all parents want to be sure that when it comes to the children that are going to be interacting with their tachshit, with their child, all of them have the same ideology, that God forbid they should hear anything that deviates from their way of thinking. It's a problem that exists. So a lot of tension that exists in that community relates to getting the kid into the right school. And sometimes you'll have a parent in a school that's going to turn to the principal and claim, how can you expect us to allow our child to sit with Yenim's child when I know that they are more liberal, that they read specific type of newspapers? And there's a lot of tension there. And in the clip we're going to show, we're going to be dealing here with a situation where Rabbi Sirotskin, who is the head of any institutions, is trying to convince Rav Steinman that there is a family, they are pushing to have their child in the school. Other parents feel that this child should be in the school because it's from a more liberal home, more ptucha in his words. And Rav Steinman is going to react in a very interesting way. He's going to reject what Rav Soroskin is claiming, and he's going to say that it is in no way Torah values to reject a child. And Rav Soroskin is going to say, well, the parents that reject the child of a specific family, they're Choshev Yidden, they're Talmidei Chachamim. And Rav Steinman is going to claim, you know why parents reject other families and other children? It is due to haughtiness. Due to haughtiness. Fascinating clip. So let's see if you could get clip one. Should I bring the mic over?
Let me just see if I can.
Here we need your patience and your prayers.
Yeah. Where's the?
You see, it's no, it's good. It's not the videos. Meaning, that's good. That's good. Does he have a desktop here or no? End the show. We'll go back. Yeah.
Okay, end the show.
End there. Video one. Okay, one of the videos.
Okay, so
One second. Yeah, this one.
Okay.
Okay. Why is that stopped? It's not going to go through? No, not going through. Stop it. Not going to go through.
Okay. Anyway. I learned my lesson the hard way. It's okay. It's okay.
I don't want to make any guarantees.
okay, try this one. I'll see.
Okay.
Mind pressing play?
I mentioned in passing the breakaway that occurred, where there was a disagreement with Rav Steinman, and some of you perhaps have heard of the term Peleg Yerushalmi. They made their way into the news, and it was a group that was read by Rabbi Auerbach, the son of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. And sometimes you learn of a concern. You learn of a concern from the fact that you have those that challenge the leader. In other words, when it came to the days of Rav Shach, Rabbi Yashiv, the earlier Haredi leaders, there was never a voice that would publicly have the ability to get up and challenge them. It was not the case. Meaning, if you are associated with the Haredi Judaism, you go ahead and follow the party line. And it changed drastically with Rav Steinman, but it tells us much more about Rav Steinman than anything else. Because there was an openness, an understanding that times have changed. And that was a reality. In the clip, which we might perhaps have an opportunity to share, perhaps not, Rav Steinman cries out when this Rav...
Can I try it?
Yeah?
Here we go.
Let's get the lights off.
Here. You're gonna need the
Play.
mic. You're gonna need the mic unless you have the.
Okay, go, play. Let's go play.
Alright.
Lights off. Lights off. Off. Go.
זה בכלל, אימא כנראה הייתה קצת יותר מוצאים יותר מכיל יותר פתוח. זה לא שזה לא פרום, אבל הביס לא פתוח, לא עושים את זה הכי טוב.
It's under the computer.
יש אחד מההורים שאומר שהוא כן יכולו? תמיד יש אחד אז כמה, הוא גיא ביטחון בשביל גיא, שום דבר. לא תחשוב שיהיה שמיים, גיא. מי אנחנו? זה חשוב, There's a question in your mind. I got it. Where's your guy?
Okay. Back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so just to translate, just one more video that.
Sure, I'll load it in.
Okay, look, the whole one. So now, back to the PowerPoint. What we had is Rav Steinman, and what Rav Steinman is turning to Rav Sorotskin, and he says, you think that if the parent who says they don't want their child to be in the same school with the child from that home, you want to know what the roots are? Gaive, gaive, gaive. Translate that, haughtiness, haughtiness, haughtiness. And when Rav Sorotskin says, well, the father who is rejecting the Torah, he says, okay, so he's a big ball guy, so. That's what Rav Steinman responds. Now this is a classic Rav Steinman understanding very well that this nature of rejection is not the byproduct of the fear of God, but it is clique or cult-like. They want to be with people who are like them. That is what Rav Steinman claims. Now back to our next slide. Let's go to the next slide. That was the video. You got Rav Steinman Schlumberg. And one more. Next. Now, next slide. Next slide. This is a classic, became very well known in Israeli circles. One more slide. Now, anyone familiar with this great rabbinic authority? Okay. As you know, in Israel, there's a fascination with Haredi Judaism. Many of you are Shtisel fans, correct?
Say, is this from Shtisel?
Well, this is not from Shtisel, but it is from a program that is similar to Shtisel. And in the next slide, you will see that there was a TV program in Israel called Shababnikim. Shababnikim was a program about 4 students in a yeshiva who were wasting their time warming the benches and doing other things. And there was a head of a yeshiva, a new head of a yeshiva that wanted the kids out. And the interactions, it fascinated Israeli society. And it's fascinating that, from my understanding, they were able to get these secular actors who picked up exactly, just as in Shtisel, how things function. So, Reb Alter Cooper is not a real Gadol B'Israel, but as you'll see in next slide, it is Shlomo Baraba, who was a well-known Israeli actor, but he became Reb Alter Cooper. Now, next slide, just a few of the Shababnikim. So the other slide we're going to try to get to, and now again, no, just go get the, forget about this. Oh, now, Rav Spitzer is the head of the yeshiva, and he is the one that's trying to get rid of the 4 Shabbatnikim. And they are fighting, and throughout the season it appears that they're trying to build the tension, where the issue is going to finally be settled by turning to who? The Gadol Ador. They're going to turn to Rav Alter Cooper. And Rav Alter Cooper is going to go ahead and make the decision, do these 4 Shababnikim, which seems to be a term that comes from Arabic, of those who are just sitting around perhaps, do they have a place in the yeshiva or not? So they go in the final chapter, they go meet Rav Alter Cooper. Rav Alter Cooper, the way it works is that you can't have a meeting in his house, he has no time for you. But as he is making his way from his house to the shtibel, you get 2 minutes to argue your point. He gives a psak, and you have to follow what Rav Alter Cooper. So the 3 parties involved is the Rav Again, Rav Alter Cooper Shlita, you have the Mashkiach there, or the head of the yeshiva, together with the Shababnikim. Now, there's a clip. Let's see if we can find that.
So I have to load that.
You're going to load it. Okay, so that's what we're going to get to in a clip. And in the clip itself, again, the fascination that exists in Israel with Yerushalmi society, with yeshiva environment, indicates a thirst and an interest where they want to know more about it. And we do know that there's an awakening that's occurring. It's an awakening throughout the land. So in this next, wow, that was fast. In this next clip, so far you see here, in the center you see the back of Rav Alter Cooper Shlita. You see the head of the yeshiva to the left.
Do you want to just describe what's happening as it goes?
And at this point, no, I think we're going to we're going to not focus so much on the conversation of argument. But the main idea is that the head of the yeshiva is trying to say, these guys are no good. You know, you rabbi and myself, we learn a lot. They're interested in wasting time. Why should I keep them in the yeshiva? And these students claim, yeshiva should be for us as well. So here we go. Let's do lights again. and press play.
מדובר פה בעצם בשאלה מאוד פשוטה. האם אנחנו רוצים ביטול תורה בבית מדרש או לא? האם אנחנו רוצים שהבחורים ילמדו 15 שעות ביום או 4?
זה לא השאלה שהוא שאל, אל תכניס לו מילים לזה.
הרב, אנחנו הרי יודעים שבחיים אתה צריך לבחור אם אתה כאן או אם אתה שם. הרב לומד 18 שעות ביום. אתה בחרת. שנינו בחרנו במשהו. הם אנשים קטנים. כל מה שמעניין אותם זה הבלי העולם.
אבל אנשים קטנים, אולי הם יוכלו לדבר עם עם ישראל.
הרב לא הבין. עם ישראל זה מאוד נחמד, אבל הרב לא חושב שהם יעזבו את בית המדרש בשביל לקרב את עם ישראל, נכון? בינינו, כבוד הרב. הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Okay, so now he says to him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu לא רוצה שנהיה ככה כמוהם. The Almighty doesn't want people to be like these 4 students. I want them out. So Rav Alter Cooper is going to respond now.
לא רצה שנהיה ככה כמוהם. תסתכל עליהם. הם בינוניים, הם שבבניקים.
גייבה! למה הקדוש ברוך הוא לא ברא את העולם שכולם צדיקים? למה? אין יכול להיות קל, כולם צדיקים, הולכים, לומדים, לא עושים צרות, למה לא ברא את העולם ככה? זה לא מעניין, את הקדוש ברוך הוא לעולם כזה משעמם אותו. היום אתה עוזב את הישיבה.
So Rav Alter Cooper just passing lights back on that the head of the yeshiva got to go. There's no room for him with his attitude. But what words does Rav Alter Cooper use? He uses the words gaive, gaive, gaive. Now, where on earth do you think the writers of this series got these 3 words from? Obviously from Rav Steinman. And obviously this is an impact. This is an impact of an understanding that's coming from the top. That the rejection of the other, the feeling that you are better because you are more traditional, because you have a higher level of commitment or more chumras, you are better. Welcome to the world of Rav Steinman. Gaive, gaive, gaive. And the impact this is having on society, while Rav Steinman's words perhaps were heard by a couple thousand, suddenly this is broadcasted, and no doubt, everyone can do their own research and figure out where they originate from. Gaive, gaive, gaive. We are having in turn an impact as well. And that's perhaps the positive way of looking at this holiday. We want to publicize what we are about with pride. What true Yiddishkeit is about with pride. And the impact and impacting the culture is taking place in a good way. Gaive, gaive, gaive is the message indeed. So that's our brief message tonight. Hopefully we learned at least something besides the entertainment. But this is a magnificent gathering here. Hanukkah is a time to bond together, to relate to one another, to be proud of who we are. And this is an evening that's special. And I hope we all remember it because this is what we are about. You know, we have at times some challenges in our existence. Gatherings that are uplifting, gatherings that bring happiness to one another are ones that we celebrate. So a big yashar koach to all those who participate, a big yashar koach to Alan, to Liz, and everyone else who put time and effort and energy to bring this incredible event together. Continue to enjoy tonight. Continue to enjoy Hanukkah. It should be a freilich and happy Hanukkah to all. Thank you.